the president has, in fact, exceeded his authority in a way that is creating a destabilizing influence. The rate at which executive power is being concentrated in our system is accelerating. And frankly, I am very alarmed by the implications of that aggregation of power. I believe we are now at a constitutional tipping point in our system. It's a dangerous point for our system to be in. And I believe that your response has to begin before this president leaves office. No one in our system goes it alone.
And joining me now to explain exactly what he meant is the man you just heard from, George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. Professor, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Sean.
A very serious charge. You packed a lot in there. You do not agree with me on a lot of political issues, but we may agree on this. Explain why you took this strong stance.
You know, the concern I have is not simply a concern that began with this president. I think President Bush also showed the same tendency, but it has accelerated under this president. And what we're seeing is a fundamental change in our system, that the framers created a system of three equal branches that exist in a type of orbital hold. They hold each other in place because they are equal and they are balanced. What we've been seeing for the last two presidencies is a very significant shift of power, largely from the legislative branch to the executive branch. And that's creating a dominant presidency. We don't have a system designed for that, and the result is it's destabilizing. What people need to remember is that the separation of powers may seem like some arcane principle, but it's not there to protect the power of politicians. It's there to protect individual rights. The framers wanted to avoid any branch concentrating or aggregating its power because they wanted to avoid abuse of individuals.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the specific examples. What specifically has this president done that concerns you the most?
Well, quite frankly, I was surprised at the degree of circumvention under this president. I was really surprised that at the State of the Union, he told Congress that he planned to go it alone, and he received applause. And it was almost a Fellini-esque moment. He was telling the legislative branch that he would be circumventing them, and he got rapturous applause from some people in that body. And it really bordered on self-loathing. I couldn't understand it. But we are living in rather strange times. You know, the president in the immigration field asked Congress for relief that was denied in terms of the so-called Dreamers, and then he secured the same relief unilaterally as president. He went out and just did it on his own. The same was seen in the health care area, where the president objected to the actions of Congress. Congress didn't give the president exactly what he wanted, and so the president went it alone. And what I've tried to convey to people that I'm normally allied with is that this is not going to be our last president. Policies and presidents change. And I believe they will rue the day when they were silent. What happens when the next president decides he's just not going to apply the Clean Air Act or he's not going to apply anti-discrimination rules? Who will be then able to say without hypocrisy that that's a violation of the Constitution?
Well, you talk about separation of powers, co-equal branches of government. When the president now has changed unilaterally the health care law, I think it's argued some 27 times, including the employer mandate, for example, are you saying constitutionally he is obliged to go back to the legislature and it's their role to change statutory dates, et cetera?
He is. Now, I must say I come to this as a Madisonian scholar. All the branches are equal, but some may be more equal than others, and I think that's the legislative branch. It's the thumping heart of the Madisonian system. The whole concept of the design for Congress is that we are a divided nation. We do have factions, but Congress is designed to take those factions and work compromise. And it just so happens that many of the areas where the president is circumventing Congress happen to be areas where we're deeply divided. There's a reason why we haven't reached a compromise, because we are so divided. Now, the way the system works is you don't then get to freelance. You have to keep working for compromise, and you have to accept what you can get in that environment.
Yeah.
But what the president is doing is going outside that system, and that is what is frankly dangerous.
It was interesting. You said, and you corrected a lot of people, and I think we often forget that we think, oh, these are the most divisive times of all. And you point out rightly, these are not unprecedented times.
No.
Our framers lived through such a time themselves. But you said that you believe that the response of Congress must begin before this president leaves office. What are you challenging them to do?
Well, the problem, Sean, is that constitutional power is very easy to lose, but it's much, much harder to regain. And the same could be said about the balance in our system. I think that Congress needs to act. I'm astonished at how really feckless and inert the Congress appears. I didn't think this was a partisan issue. The framers assumed, and particularly Madison assumed, that ambition would counteract ambition, that no matter what our divisions were, members of Congress would jealously protect their power. I don't think he ever anticipated a Congress like the one we're seeing. So Congress needs to be active, and the first thing they need to do is to try to get the courts to recognize the ability of members of Congress to simply get access to the courts, to get judicial relief. In the last few decades, the courts have restricted what's called member standing. And I think that is one of the big contributors of the problems we're having. The courts are simply absent without constitutional leave. And so they're letting these problems fester when they could be answered through judicial review.
You know, if you want judicial relief, that's certainly one measure, but don't they have their own constitutional authority, for example, the power of the purse, and they could exercise that?
Well, I addressed that in my testimony, Sean, because that is the mantra you hear from courts when they say they're not going to intervene in these disputes. But this president has challenged the power of the purse. You know, in the healthcare field, over $400 million was committed to one use by Congress, and the president simply transferred it to another use. We also saw a controversy involving shifting funds of an office that Congress thought that they had eliminated. So in today's fiscal world, we have so much discretionary funding that it's very difficult for Congress to actually use the power of the purse with the precision people think they can do so as a check or balance.
I don't think, Professor, that this is going to make you very popular at some of the Washington cocktail parties among some of your friends, but thank you for being with us.